The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you can hear me fine. Just to sort of give quick housekeeping on this. First of all, we have made a slight mistake. I am not Catherine Chung. My name is Keith Joseph. And you're all in listen-only mode. On the right-hand side, you will find a chat box. Also, there is a question box. I will try and answer questions as we go along. However, the fact that I can't actually multitask very well means what I'll do is I'll try and actually answer a lot of questions if I can on the fly. If not, I'll answer them at the end when there will be a question and answer session. Please raise your hands, said that if you do have any questions or if you have any comments in any shape or form. This webinar is planned to only last half an hour. It is not a heavy sales type environment. It's an informative viewpoint from a UniPrint standpoint with regards to a subject. It's part of a set of 3 that we're doing over the next few weeks. And hope that you will find them interesting and thought-provoking. So without that, let's crack on. So as I said, my name is Keith Joseph. I am the EMEA Territory Manager for UniPrint Software. The subject of today's webinar is time to secure your print infrastructure. And hopefully you'll find this of interest and relevance to environments that you have out there, whether you're a reseller, an end user, distributor of anything that sort of nature. So without sort of waiting around too much, the interesting thing about it is that printing is one of those subjects that gets pushed to the back of everybody's mind in the IT and industry standards because and I dare say it is a very ugly subject, and it's an ugly subject because it's always had problems, even from day one. When you originally got a printer, you bought a machine, you bought a printer, you bought a serial port, you got disks or floppy disks, if you're old enough to remember that far back. You had to get the right driver. It was very, very painful. It would go wrong. You'd always end up running back and forth to the shops. As technology progressed, we got USB, we got the internet, which made driver adoption very, very much easier. But it's still a problem in the way print actually works and the way it actually operates within the IT environment. And it becomes more so of a problem when you get to corporate infrastructure, when you start putting into network printing and all those sort of subjects. But if you actually sort of drill it down into really where we are, printing has never been basically seen as racy, sexy, innovative, any of those sort of words you can use. It just isn't that sort of technique. It's always at the back of the pile. Where are we going to the cost centers are spread across multiple parts of the business. It could be that IT owns the networking and the endpoint devices. It could be that the contracts sit with the legal team or the finance team. It could be that the office manager owns the paper and the toner. It's just a very, very dispersed operation. And the reason it's very, very dispersed is it's actually quite cumbersome and labor intensive. And it's not driven by IT. It's driven by the users. It's the users that want to print. It's the users that really drive the need for print. And within IT, we do forget that the days of paperless office aren't here yet. Are we heading to that way? Probably not, because we actually now print more than we ever have in the past. And therefore, the responsibility of that squarely fits within the IT department on one side of it, but also the fact is as you're printing more, you're opening yourself up to more loopholes and more areas of concern with regards to confidentiality, paper loss, and all sorts of bits and pieces that are running around within the organisation. But you have to be mindful as well that printing will never go away. If you sit on a train or you walk around, dare I say something like the City of London or Berlin or Amsterdam, you will always see people carrying tons and tons of paper around. Just because we try and put everything into soft copy here within the IT industry doesn't necessarily mean that other industries don't. And if you look at legal, you look at health, you look at all those sort of all those other sort of companies that are out there, they are very much reliant on paper. I mean, I was sat watching a guy building a skyscraper in London on Tuesday, and all the drawings that he was using were on paper. Because that's the easiest mechanism for doing it. You walk around Lloyd's of London, it's all on paper. So printing is not going to go away, but therefore the security element of the print is always going to be there, and it's actually going to get worse. And when you're talking about security, you sort of break it down into really two challenges that come out there. There's the intentional breach that will be out there, and then there's the unintentional. And which is worse? I mean, they're both as bad as each other because they both are effectively breaches of confidential documents within the organisation. And if you're dealing with a charity that's dealing with sensitive information, that could be more catastrophic if it's unintentional than if it's intentional. But likewise, intentional is an intent, and it's actually criminal in the way it goes through. So I'm just going to try and give you sort of two sort of ideas in relation to differentiation between the two. So if you look at an unintentional breach, standard document, we've all seen printers like this around offices around the world. A user prints a confidential document. By the time he gets to the printer, the document's gone. It could be that somebody unintentionally has picked up all the paperwork that's on there thinking it's his, and has picked up the contract. And that could be an employment contract, it could be a legal document, it could be something as innocent as an email, but it could be an email pertaining to an individual, to a project, to various different ramifications to go with it. It's unintentional, but that document's gone. That document is now circulating within the wider world, within the wider sphere of what you as the printer or the printee intended for it to go. You've accidentally sent it to the wrong printer, and as we know, when you start looking at larger organizations, you have lots and lots of printers, and printing is quite, in its crudest form, is quite a dumb solution. It just always goes back to where you last pointed it, and if you don't change it, it will go there. But that could mean that it's printed to a different floor, it's printed to a different department, it could be printed to a different building, it could be printed in a different part of the world, and therefore you have the responsibility to try and find that document. So you end up sort of picking the phone up and, hello, I think I've printed the document out. Please, can you put it in the bin? It's common. It happens. We deal with it. Unfortunately, in the world of compliance and security, it's a breach because that document has gone to an unintended destination. That document could be going completely to the wrong hands. If you're looking at a PIP, it could be going to the employee that the PIP's about. It's a session that it's a document that needs to be controlled. Then there's a sneaky one, of course, that always happens, and that's that you've gone to the printer, somebody's been there before picking their document up, and they've had a quick nose of what you're printing. So the information that is on there is actually disappeared because although they've not taken the document, they've actually got the gist of the information that's pertaining to the document and moving from there, which is not good. Especially as if you're dealing with quite sensitive information, but even just general stuff, you don't want people knowing what's going on willy-nilly. And then this is becoming quite a new one, really, and that's when the printer is offline. as we know, printers are energy vampires. They sit there and they suck energy 24/7. So manufacturers are desperately trying to find mechanisms to actually save energy, to be a lot more green, to be a lot more friendly to the environment. And that's driven, again, by users. It's driven also by the cost of electricity, the cost of ownership, blah, blah, blah. The interesting thing is that quite often a lot of printers, when they sit there for a long period of time, will actually go offline. And if a user is not aware that it's gone offline and doesn't know to hit the button to actually bring it back online, the documents just get queued behind. Now, if you have a number of users that are not aware of that situation, and then print documents don't come out, they go back to their desk, they print it again, they print it again, and then somebody finally comes along and knows what they're doing, and they just hit the big green button, and it starts printing out the print jobs. Suddenly you're back to this situation where you get a lot of documents are now stacked up on the printer, where you can then start having people reading it before it's collected, or documents disappearing because they're not realized it's the whole thing. So it's quite a spiral of problems that happen in an unintentional manner, but they have massive consequences and massive ramifications that can potentially go from there. The intentional breach scenario is quite a different situation altogether. This is when done with intent. Now, if you like Formula One, or you're an Italian descent, you'll actually know this gentleman. And when I actually showed this to our distribution company in Italy, they all knew exactly who he was. This is a guy called Nigel Stepney. And this is just to really give you an idea of an intentional breach scenario. Nigel Stepney worked for Ferrari through the golden periods of the noughties. Nigel Stepney was the chief engineer. Nigel Stepney had access to a lot of information. Nigel Stepney was a Brit living in Italy, which I could think of worse places to live. But he wanted to come home, and he wanted a job with a well-known British team. So what Nigel Stepney did is he gave a 780-page Ferrari document to the chief designer of McLaren. That 780-page document was actually the specs to next year's car and the research that they were doing on it. And the reason is McLaren had been in doldrums, and basically it was competitive. The interesting thing is that Nigel Stepney would never have got caught if it wasn't the fact of a photocopier person in Woking that actually was a Ferrari fan and realised what happened. Because what Nigel Stepney had done is that he couldn't get the document out of the Ferrari factory because security had closed down all of the USB ports. Security was sniffing the emails. Security was looking at all the documents and the traceability. What security wasn't doing, though, was actually tracking out who could print what, where, when, and how. And what Nigel did is he just printed it, and he walked out the front gate with a 780-page document. That document cost McLaren $100 million. It was a $50 million fine, and then they were kicked out of the championship, which cost them another $50 million. It cost Nigel Stepney his job. But actually, McLaren won out of it because the following year they won the World Championship, and they earned a lot more money than that because Lewis Hamilton had won. But that's a clear show of intentional breach of security within an organisation, because there's no controls, there's no mechanism within print and within the organisation to control the print, and therefore you can't report on who's printed what, where, when, and how. If you put this down really into a more run-of-the-mill type environment, if you run, for example, a chemical company, it could be the formula to a new medicine. It could be the sales out report for an organisation for the last 3 months. It could be all the contacts a company has because a salesman's about to move to a new company. Now, you can't stop people printing, but what you can do is that you can monitor and manage what they print and how they print, and you can report back of it from a compliance point of view. So it's an area where people need to be looking at security breaches, whether they're intentional or unintentional, because the ramifications can be huge, as you can see in this case here. The interesting thing is, a lot of companies do have this mentality of putting their head in the sand a little bit because they think it's not going to happen to me. Well, Gartner did some research, and the interesting thing is that they found that 70% of companies had one or more accidental data breaches through printing. Now, the interesting thing is that it's the terminology accidental, and it could be that they're not going to report on their intentional breaches, and in a lot of cases, as we use the Ferrari example, they actually don't know there was a breach until somebody else pointed it out to them. But what it means is that there is a huge problem, and therefore with the problem an opportunity when it comes to security within the print environment. The interesting thing is that on the back of this has grown a huge industry. And I said I was in London earlier on this week, and I saw this particular brand. There was the Shred Depot. There was all sorts of various different trucks running around the city of London. Shred-it have just bought 108 shredding trucks for London. So companies are aware that printed matter is a problem, therefore they will shred it. The interesting thing is that they shouldn't be at that stage where they should have so much confidential information that they need to shred it, because they should be controlling their print a lot better, and they should understand what they're printing and the mechanism they're printing. Yes, there is a place for shredding, because once you finish with a document that's legitimately printed, you need to dispose of that document. The interesting thing is that if you actually probably looked at the figures of what people are shredding, it's when they've printed multiple documents, they've done this, they've done that, and therefore there's all these potential problem cases that go through. So when you're looking at secure print framework, there's three lines that you really need to look at, and that first of all, you've got to decide to what level. With all security, you can lock everything down. I mean, the ultimate security when you decide to do it is, I'm not going to print anything. I'm just going to convert everything to PDF, and I'm going to lock down the USB ports. I'm going to lock down everything else, and therefore I'm not going to be have the ability to track things out. That's completely not sustainable. So what you really need to decide at what level of resilience that you need within the organization. The first thing you've got to take into consideration is not all print and printers are equal. Different departments and different companies have different scenarios of what they need to do for their print. So you need to prioritize the departments. So when prioritizing departments, it could be that HR and legal are the two most important. It could be sales. It could be R&D. It could be various different departments. But you need to understand what they're printing and why they're printing it, and the ramifications of putting security in for them. You need to look at areas where misuse can happen. Printers that use a lot of resources, a classic example. Printers that get used at 8 o'clock in the morning when somebody's been off on holiday for 2 weeks. There's quite a big misuse there, and it all has a cost impact. You also need to understand the true cost. And what we're talking about with the true cost is that when you're doing the analytics, it's not just how much does a printer cost you, and it's not how much a piece of paper costs you. There's actually the management side of it, and there's the how much does it cost my business from an IT support perspective, how much use do I get from it, how much energy am I using, how much footprint, how much this, how much that. There's a lot more that you need to look into, and UniPrint can actually help you understand that and show you savings within that environment. You also need to understand where the infrastructure is going. Everybody thinks, it's just printing. Well, with the rise of mobile, bring your own device and cloud, it's actually changed the the way we interact with our infrastructure. I mean, if you looked at an infrastructure 5 years ago, it was a very static. It didn't move too much. But you've got the rise of Apple's iPads. So you've got the rise of thin client VDI, server-based compute. The rest of it that's coming through. Users want to be more mobile. They want to work all over the place. And what this really means is that they want to work in remote sites, but they want the same functionality, look and feel from the remote sites. They might want to work from home. And here's a question for you guys. Do you want a worker that works from home being able to print at home? Because at the moment you can't stop them plugging in a USB printer and actually being able to print in their home environment. Not without doing some very, very big fundamental lockdowns of the systems. It's a lot more controllable on VDI and thin client because of the golden image, but the end of the day is that if somebody's got a fat system, how do you control their home printing? And how do you actually report on what they're printing at home? If your clients or your company deals with quite sensitive information, do you really want that information in a rubbish bin in somebody's office at home that then potentially gets put into the trash can outside? That could then end up in landfill. It's negating the fact that you've got shredding services and the rest of it. So it's when you're deciding to do it, you need to understand the bigger picture. You need to understand what you want from your print, but where your printing is going to go and where your user's going to use their print. You need to then document what you do, and never forget it's IT's responsibility for printing, and that really is the bottom line. It's the IT. The buck always stops with IT when it comes to anything that's in the binary world, and this even goes down to the ongoing requirements for regulatory compliance, the rest of it. Yes, you might have a security director or you might have a head of security, but the end of the day is that he will always come running back to IT for security breaks. With that, though, there is a compelling argument you need to document everything in relation to costs, right the way to proof points to go back. So in documenting, you need to prove that your organisation has adopted the best way of doing things. You've got to document that because you've got to be able to prove it, because it's like any secure infrastructure. If you can't document it, it leaves things open to doubt and debate. You need to show how the technology around your secure print will incorporate evolving technology. As I said earlier on, it's as we adopt more mobile compute, we adopt more cloud-based on-premise, off-premise type operations. How does the print interact with that? How do you control that? How do you manage to secure? How do you ensure that the right printer or the right person is mapped to the right printer in the right location? You need to look at what you don't want is this whole argument of a hit print, but it's going back to the print queue from my previous place. So therefore, how can you show the business that every time I hit print, I'm going to print to the right printer without it being a major impact or a major hassle point to the user of the solution? Because as I stated earlier, it's the user that is driving this, but the user doesn't want the pain of dealing with it. It's down to IT to do that. And that really means how can we simplify the whole print-associated overheads that go with the business. The more simple we can make it, the easier it is for the organisation, because it means there's less calls, there's less this, there's less that. If you give the user the same look and feel wherever he goes, whatever he's doing, the user's going to be happy. The user understands. He doesn't care what the endpoint device is. He doesn't care whether it's an all-singing, all-dancing MFP. He doesn't care if it's just a little laser jet that's doing what he needs to do. He just wants to be able to print his document when, where, and how he wants to. But then you've also got to be able to show and report on what the users are up to. And this is quite a key one now because of interdepartmental billing and the rest of it. But if you can't report on it, what users are doing, what the usages are, how can you actually understand how you're going to drive it forward? How do you understand where your pain points are? And that really leads on to that you can now start charging interdepartmental. So an IT department can start showing an overhead, or start showing it as a cost center to different departments, and that will actually drive behaviour within departments. And if you're driving behaviour and actually making people accountable to their printing services, they start to take things like security a lot more seriously, because they realise the fact that they need to keep an eye on it, because again, it's about the user, not about the IT department. And then it's delivery. And how do you manage an automated, hassle-free, worry-print services? And that's really where UniPrint comes into the equation, and how we can actually show you what does that. So the 3 points that we sort of raised there was, how do we automatically assign a printer to a session to a user? Well, UniPrint does that automatically. UniPrint's quite unique in the fact that we pick everybody up from the Active Directory, the user groups, and the memberships, and then we also then look at the connected devices and connected host names of where people are. What this means, though, is that we can always ensure that the user is always printing to the right print in the right location. What does that really mean? What that really means is that the element of I'm printing to the wrong location is gone. So therefore, I'm reducing all my print queues. I'm reducing everything I need to do. I'm reducing all the problems I have. And it's really about reducing the unintentional security breaches within the organization. It's the first stage that you'll put in place to make sure that users, especially users that are more mobile than static, are always mapped to the right location, doing the right thing. Why would you do that? Well, it's just simple. It's just making everybody's life easier. If you are always picking up the right print in the right location, whether you're in different locations, different floors, different geos, it means that if they've got the same look and feel and they hit print and they know it's going to print out to the printer that's nearest to them, they don't have to change the print queue. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that. It means they're not going to phone IT. It means they're not going to be hassling people in the office to, how do I download this latest driver? How do I do this? Because it's all done for you. And that's the true value that UniPrint will bring. The biggest ramification, though, is it reduces the security risk within your organization dramatically, because you're not printing to the wrong locations. Once you've done that, though, the second part is looking at secure pull printing. Some people call it follow me printing, but secure pull printing. What this really means is that you don't actually print in any shape or form. You don't until the user authenticates himself at the device. At the endpoint device, the user can either use an integrated pad within the device itself, or there's a third element that we have, which is called a VPad, where we can actually authenticate the user. Now, you can either use this to RFID cards, HID cards, you could use PIN authentication, you could use username authentication, or you can actually use both. So what you could use is maybe the door entry card system, because you're just looking at a unique card, and a PIN controller. Why would you do that? Well, believe it or not, is that companies put in door entry systems to stop unauthorized staff going in and out of certain parts of the building, or stop visitors coming in and out. But what do? They lend out cards to their mates because they've got in the office and they're saying, oh, I've left my card at home. What do I do with that? Okay, no, don't worry, here's my card, you can go and do it. If you're then running the print jobs off the same card, there is a theoretical chance, however remote, that the user can go up to the print job and actually see what you're printing and pull the print jobs off before you're done, because you've lent your card. So with UniPrint, we can double authenticate. So not only can you use the card as the authentication engine for the first stage, you can then put in a PIN code and drive the PIN code automatically to be entered before the document will come out. What Follow Me Printing also allows you to do is by not printing, you're actually reducing the waste within the organization. So therefore there's a cost reduction that they can actually bring down from the organization, because you can show the cost savings that go through. Likewise though, is because you're not printing the job, you're not leaving print jobs stacked on printers, but also you can print the job in one location and then go to another location and pull the print job, because you're all printing it from the data center. You're all printing it from a centralized point. Now, why is that quite important today? Well, as we drive more towards the third way, as in cloud, hybrid, on-premise, off-premise compute, we are wanting to put more services into the data center. By putting more services into the data center, we can control them better, we can manage them better. So actually the knock-on effect is that by doing that, we can reduce the number of sorry, got questions coming in, and we'll actually reduce the cost, because you can actually get rid of a lot of print servers. And to answer the question, yes, it is encrypted. At the moment, it's quite a basic level encryption between the two, but when version 9 of the software comes out, we're going to encrypt to 256-bit encryption. So hopefully that'll answer your question. But yes, there is a plan to do that. And if I just bear with me a second, I should see if I can get a bigger question. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask at the moment. I'll try and answer these questions in a second, because I can't actually get to. So yeah, it will encrypt between the two. Oops. And then the final part, really from a security point of view, is reporting and archiving. This is actually quite important from a security standpoint, because you need to understand what people are doing and how people are doing it. And the reason is that if you don't understand what people are doing and what people are reporting on, they can use it as an opportunity for not knowing what they're doing, and therefore can run out of control. The interesting thing is that it's the amount of companies that don't actually know how much their print jobs are costing them. What you can actually now start doing is that once you've started reporting, you can start looking at trends within an organization. Are there certain departments that use a lot more printing than they should? Are there departments that are abusing the situation because they're printing everything? They're printing every email known to man that's coming through. There's various different bits and pieces that can go to that sort of stage. It's also about, as I said, charging back and looking at what we can do interdepartmental. So if people are having tend to be very heavily printing, one, you can warn departments within organizations that their costs are out of control, but secondly, you can start charging in between. And UniPrint allows you to do that. The other thing is that you can start looking at increasing the security by tracking what people are doing, when, where, and how. And you can drive that down to a departmental level. You can drive it down to an individual level. So if you have a security company or security concerns within a company because you've got an employee that's potentially going to be leaving, they're on a PIP, they're on this level, you can actually start tracking what they're looking at, what they're printing. And you can actually then drive that down within UniPrint to, you can actually archive the jobs. So what you can do is you can say to you can advise an individual that every print job that they've been printing will actually be kept within the data center for review, subject to legal consequences based on per country. And the reason it's based on per country is that different countries have different ways of dealing with data and who owns the data and who owns the privacy of the data. So, for example, there's different laws in Germany than there is to France. There is different laws in the UK than there is into Ireland. And there's very few laws in America, but it can be driven down to a state level. So you've got to be just mindful. But it's a functionality that is there that will keep users on their track, because if they know the fact that you can see the documents they're printing, but likewise you can also, by archiving documents, that if you know that employee A has been on holiday and you know full well that they come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and they start printing out 50 full color, very high quality prints, you can actually look at what they're printing from an IT perspective, and if it happens to be their holiday snaps, you can go back to them and say, look, do you really think this is appropriate to be printing in your organization? Do you really think you should be doing this? So not only can it act as a security tool, it can also act as a deterrent for people abusing print services within an organization. The interesting thing is that when you actually start driving into secure print, is that you actually start to get some interesting other benefits that come with it, one of which is cost reduction. Secure pool printing actually allows you to have points within your ROI process and period to actually show the true ROI that secure pool print has done. And the reason is that you are showing how much printing was costing before. You can then show how much the cost printed afterwards. You can then use review points at given periods, so maybe every 3 months, that as people's habits are changing regarding printing, there's actually a reduction in the ROI cost, because people are getting into better habits, they're doing better things, because they know full well that the secure pool printing is not only not printing jobs they don't need and keeping the security within the organization happier, it's also knock-on effect is reducing the cost. And Gartner estimate that it can reduce by paper usage within an organization by 20% plus. Companies need to look at that from their own level. It will fluctuate depending on the business and depending on what they do. For example, a legal company will print more than an engineering company, but an engineering company will print higher quality. So you need to sort of have checks and balances in relation to that. But the average in the industry is around about 20%. If you start adding other bits and pieces that can be done from secure pool printing, i.e. Forcing certain functionality onto users like duplexing, you can reduce that further. Because you're printing less, by default, you're reducing your carbon footprint within the organization. For larger organizations, especially multinationals, that's quite a key driver for them. They really, really do want to see a reduction in how much energy they're using, because they might be a member of the carbon offset scheme, all those sort of various bits and pieces. Printing can help them do that. But also secure. And actually, as I said, Gartner have something really interesting to say when it comes to this. And Gartner's estimation is that they estimate that printing costs larger organizations anything between 1% and 3% of the total revenue. But what the real headline figure is that the secure pool printing can save 40% of that cost. So if you've got a company that's turning over X and you can save 40%, and 1% of that is disappearing down print, and you can save 40% of that, there's actually a real impact into the organization and what it does. So you can actually show clear benefits from moving, not only from a security point of view, but also from a savings point of view. Just a quickie on UniPrint, we're a division of Axio, which was previously called GFI, if anybody's around. We're headquartered in Toronto, Canada. We were founded in 1998. We are the leaders within printing solutions. Our raison d'etre is really around the mobile compute marketplace. So it is where users will move between different sites, different locations, different floors, different geos. If users are static and are not looking for security, secure pool, and that sort of nature, we're probably not the right solution for. But as soon as you're looking to future-proof, looking at how you're going to drive printing solutions within your organisation to be more secure and more agile, we're the people that you really need to talk to. We sell purely through the channel. So if you're an end user, you need to speak to your channel partner. If you're a reseller, you need to speak to your local distribution. If your distribution, hello, thank you for your time. We originally came from the PDF background, but we have moved on from the universal print, but we've moved on so much from there. There's a lot going on within the industry, and we're here to solve the problems. So we did have a couple of questions. One of them was print jobs to be encrypted over data lines. So with the VPAD, we just use a standard link between the VPAD and the operation. We then will tunnel between two locations using an encrypted line. At the moment, it's basic encryption between the two, and the reason is that it's a tunnel, so therefore it can't be penetrated. We are aware, though, that hackers are getting more and more sneaky in the way they do things. So we are, as I said, in version 9, going to 256-bit encryption between the VPAD. The VPAD also has one other functionality that can be used, and that other functionality is that it acts as a compression engine between the data center and the remote site or the remote floor or the remote destination that happens that it needs to be sending the print job to. What does this really mean? It means that we can take a lot of lag out of any print jobs that you have going. So therefore, it's a lot more slick in relation to what it does and how it does it. We're actually going to cover that in a later webinar in the next. I don't think it's the next one. I think it's the one in October. So if you would like to know more about that, please let us know, and I'll be more than willing to go into a lot more detail. So that was one question. Hopefully that answers that particular question. Second question we had is, will the job be stored on the hard drive of the MFD? No. Well, I say no. Yes and no. It depends on how you set it up. If you're using the VPAD, for example, the print job itself will not get released from the data center until the user wants to release it. So therefore, it's actually maintained within the data center, or it's maintained within the print server location, wherever that could be. The ideal would be within the data center. Realities is that most people want to have their print servers in the data center because it's easier to manage. So there's actually no need to store the job on the hard drive of the device itself. And the reason being is that if you store it on a hard drive within the device and then you change locations, it's on the hard drive of the device where you were. It's not actually where you want to be. So what this does is actually says to the user, look, we're not going to do anything with this print job. We're going to hold it in the data center where we know it's secure. We know nobody can get to it other than IT staff and other than people within that, until such time as you, as the user, want to pull it down. And as soon as you, as the user, want to put it down, we can then call that down as and when you need to. And hopefully, Pascal, that answers your question on that one. just to answer your question, Ian, the licensing model is quite simple. We work off concurrent users. So it's number of users logged into the sessions that are active within the environment at that given time. So therefore, if you've got an organization that's spread across 3 geos, Asia, Europe, and America, and you have 1,000 users in each, you know full well that at no given point all 3,000 users can be on time. So what you do is you buy 1,000 users because you know there's going to be 1,000 current users given at that point, as an example. So it's done on the amount of people that are logged in at that given point. The VPAD itself is sold on a per device basis, and that again that can be purchased from your local rep for the device. When it comes to how many print servers we can manage and bridge servers and the rest of it, which is slightly more technical, we don't care. At the end of the day, we just do it on concurrent licenses. If you've got 1,000 print servers that you need to manage, that's fine. We'll manage 1,000 print servers for you. If that's over 1,000 users, it's quite a big estate, but you can really you can really do that. We came away from the server-based model because it just became unsustainable and quite difficult to manage from a user perspective. So this is just quite simple. You know the number of users, you know how many people are going to be logged at any given time. That's a report that you can pull off the network quite simply. You just buy the appropriate amount. If you find that you need more, you can buy them in incrementals of 10 to move them up to get you to the right way. If you run out of licensing, it just means that those users can't print until such time as you resolve it or somebody logs out and then allowing them to log into the system. So we try to keep it as painless, as simple as possible. And hopefully that'll answer your questions. Are there any more questions? He asked himself. No, that looks like we're done. So if you go onto the uniprint.net webpage, like everybody has these days, there is a downloadable 30-day license key that you can download. There are YouTube pages where there's help guides on that. The 30-day license gives you the right to get into support, and they will help you. There is technical support across Europe supplied from our distribution partners within each country, and within each distribution partner they have a number of trained resellers that will be more than happy to help you look at how we can help install and do the evaluation. We can also help if you want to go into more deeper levels with regards to the product. There's white papers if you're looking for case studies. So there's lots and lots of information. The two key drivers, as I say, is the uniprint.net website or the UniPrint print channel on YouTube, where there's a lot of videos, case studies where users have used it, and it's always worth a conversation and a look just to see what we're going. If you need reference sites, we're happy to arrange reference calls. If you're looking for POCs, I say talk to your local rep or your local distribution partner, and they'll be happy to organise. Likewise, we can do the same. There's a list of partners on there that can do that. Oops, sorry, there's another question just popped in. So, bear with me a second. I have to say, this is not... so, David, how much is the pricing and is it per user? Yeah. So, as I say, it is per user. You buy it in blocks of 10. You will need to purchase from a local reseller. In Denmark, the one that comes to mind is NNIT. If you are a reseller yourself, and I don't have that information, I do apologise, you can actually go to FinTech AB and they will actually be able to give you pricing. So there's a number of different sources where you can get it. No, we don't sell directly. And the reason is that selling directly is very much an American model that we don't follow within EMEA. And the whole idea being is that we can give you the best experience through partners that actually know and understand our product. However, we will support you to the best of our ability, and when support is done by UniPrint, it is 24/7, follow the sun, and it's there because we realise that as much as it's not mission critical printing, it's emotionally critical to companies to actually do that. Hopefully that's answered your question. And if there's no more questions, which it doesn't look like there is, it's only for me to actually say thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I have overrun slightly. It was meant to be half an hour. We have another webinar next week where we will dive into a little bit more detail in relation around the cost savings and how we can do that. But other than that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and my details are on the screen. If not, please feel free to contact us or contact your partner. And again, thank you very much.